Okay, so don't take this video as anything too serious or important, but it's just a couple of sort of essence of thought classics that I want to get off my chest. The first of them I was never going to talk about really, and then the second one of them I just thought, oh, do you know what? I'll talk about both of them, and I apologise. I know there'll be some of you who'll say, why are you watching essence of thought videos? I don't know. I've always done this kind of thing on YouTube. I used to do it with some Christian channels. Specific, it's kind of Venom Fang X thing. You watch the video just to kind of facepalm at it, at the lack of logic, audacious lack of reasoning, the breathtaking lack of reasoning. And then I moved on a year or two ago. I was really big into watching Kevin Logan and Christy Winter's videos in the same kind of way. And now I've kind of condensed it. The purest form of that, the purest form, a fix of that I can get out there is Essence of Thoughts. I watch Ethel's videos for that, and Ethel came out with something today, which I'll come to in a minute. The one from the other week was about this was kind of interesting. It was about the Daily Mail. She was quoting the Daily Mail, and what she said was that the Daily Mail is literally a Nazi newspaper, which, for somebody who claims to always dot the I's and cross the T's, I don't know how it can be literally a Nazi newspaper, given that literally the National Socialist Party doesn't exist. I suppose it could potentially be a sort of literally a neo-Nazi newspaper, but you can't literally be a literally a Nazi newspaper when the Nazis don't exist anymore. I know there was a period back in, I think, the 30s with sort of Oswald Mosley when some of the British newspapers, right-wing and left-wing newspapers like the Mail and the Mirror, sort of had a couple of pieces that were, I suppose, sympathetic back in the 30s, but that's a bit of a reach, really, isn't it? But it makes me think that if that's what we're talking about, literal Nazism, how would Essence of Thought rate the Second World War? What was that? I thought it was us against the Nazis. You know, I mean, okay, the Allies versus the Axis nations, but it was us versus the Nazis. But surely it was Nazis versus Nazis, wasn't it? Because this is how Essence of Thought is looking at it. Essence of Thought looks at the Daily Mail, which, from my perspective, is a sort of moderate right-wing newspaper, right? It's hardly very extreme. It's kind of centers itself not on extremism and far rightism, but on sort of, I would say, old people's views. Really, it's kind of people who are 70 or 80 years old by and large, and they just want things to sort of stay as they'd like them to be, right? They're not trying to they've not got murderous intent or want to overthrow the world. They're not particularly revolutionary. They just want things to stay the same. And that's the kind of thing that the Daily Mail appeals to. I mean, I note with like cryptocurrency, if you look at the This Is Money, which is the Daily Mail thing, they're vehemently opposed to this newfangled internet money. Right? Don't touch it with a barge pole, anybody, because you can't trust any of these things. Go and put it in a bank and get 0.001% interest a year. That's their kind of mentality in the Daily Mail. It's just very sort of insular and sort of stuck in wanting to maintain things the same. It is very conservative in that sense. But if you compare their attitudes to social issues with the attitudes to social issues of the British or American populations back at the time of World War II, where there were these literal Nazis, the average person's, I would say 95% of society's views on most of these social issues, on something like homosexuality, for example, would be way more strict, way more severe, way more negative than the Daily Mail's is today. So if the Daily Mail is a literal Nazi newspaper for those perspectives, then the British and the Americans during the Second World War, and the Indians helping us out, and the Belgians, and the Poles who escaped and were fighting, and the French, all these different people, right? They were all literal Nazis then? Because if the Daily Mail is literal Nazis for its views today, then how could they not be literal Nazis when their views on these social issues were less progressive than the Daily Mail's is today? I just, I suppose it's just a wonderful exercise in a hyperbole, but that just really got to me, that one. And then the one today was even better. I had to tweet on this because when I said it, I just stopped the video, took the time point and put it out there. What Ethel said was, what she said was that this was the line of reasoning that trans women are women, women are adult human females, therefore trans women are adult human females. And then said that the reason for this is because the parts follow the person, not the other way round.
Miles also uses very disrespectful language when referring to trans people, namely the constant usage of the term biological male.
Someone that has grown up in a biological male body. When you grow up as a biological male, but people that grew up in biological male bodies...
This is just misgendering with the extra steps. Trans women are women, women are adult human females, ergo trans women are adult human females. The person defines the parts, not the other way round.
I find this really dispiriting, this. It seems like people that Ethel would have been one some time ago were really keen to differentiate gender and biological sex. And now it seems they're really keen to put them back together again, but sort of in the other way round, sort of saying, no, it's not all about biological sex. There's this separate thing, gender and gender identity. And your gender and gender identity aren't necessarily the same as your they don't follow on from your biological sex. But now they're saying, no, actually it's the same thing, but your biological sex follows on from your gender identity. I mean, and biological sex, by the way, of course, is something that transcends our species. It's something that we apply the same way across the animal kingdom. So this would apply to dogs or ferrets or badgers or anything like that, okay? The parts would follow the person. If a badger feels like it's a female person, if it's got a female-oriented badger brain, then it's a female badger, for crying out loud. I mean, the whole... You can understand the thing that exasperated me with this initially was just the lack of logic. Its essence of thought used to be somebody always full of hyperbole and bullshit. But one thing that she did do is she could easily pick up like an obvious logical flaw in an argument and a piece of equivocation. If a Christian theologian or philosopher had done this and took a word and equivocated between two definitions, Ethel would have picked up on that just like that. Bang, this is what's going on here, this is what they're doing, pathetic, never going to fall for that. And then this is what she does here. She uses one definition of woman, trans women are women, because woman doesn't mean biological female, and then she says, but women are biological human females. So then she switches to the other definition and says, oh look, so when you put these two things together, it's just an equivocation on the definition you're using for woman. It's so obvious. It's such a crap bit of logic and reasoning that it beggars belief. And when you look at it a little bit further, I didn't really tweet on this bit, but when you look at the person, the parts are defined by the person and not the other way round. On all these sort of trans discussions, there's always been this sort of line of somebody identifying as an attack helicopter, which I've never had any time for. It's a bit tired and it really doesn't take account of what we're talking about here at all. It's just a bit crass. And to be quite honest, if you really do identify as an attack helicopter, I'd expect you to put a bit of effort in, right? It's a pretty high-grade piece of military equipment. So I am assuming if you identify it as an attack helicopter, you will have informed the relevant government agencies to make sure that you are licensed as a piece of military hardware in civilian ownership. I'm assuming you do all your pre-flight checks before you go out for a walk. You know, you make sure that you're regularly serviced, etc., etc. If you do all those things, if you try and live your life like an attack helicopter, then fair call. But I don't know that anybody does, to be quite honest. But the thing with this is that the reason that I've always found that, apart from the fact it's just a bit crass and it doesn't aid the conversation, is that it doesn't really make sense. But if you take this parts follow the person thing, then it kind of does, really. It kind of legitimizes that, because there's no end to that. I've heard people say things like, well, if you can just identify as a woman, then why can't you just identify as a horse? And of course, there's lots of reasons why that is. But if you start saying, so you can just identify as a human female, as a biological female, because that's what this conversation was about, biological femaleness. That's the context in which female was being used, biological femaleness. If you can just identify into that, and then the parts follow the person, so you've got a penis, so it's a female penis, so you're producing sperm, so they would be female sperm. There's no reason why you can't identify as a horse. I haven't got any hooves, but these are horses' hands, okay? Because I identify as a horse, and these are my hands. Ergo, they're horses' hands because the parts follow the person. I might not have horse DNA, right? I haven't got horse genetics, but I have got genetics, and I am a horse after all, because I identify as a horse, and the parts follow the person. Ergo, actually, I have got horse DNA. I mean, the gloves are off then, aren't they? That's how far you've gone. You've actually got these crass arguments that people are making. They're all valid now, right? You pretty much can identify as whatever the fuck you want now, because the parts simply follow the person. You define yourself, and then those parts become whatever it is that you define. So I don't know. What I'll do is I'll leave you a link to it. I'm not going to say I recommend you watch it for yourself. I don't. If you're a sucker for punishment like me, right, you can do what they did in the Middle Ages, and you can prostrate yourself on a table and have somebody flog your back for your sins, or you can watch some of this crap every now and again, which is the modern version. And it's what I do. So I'll give you a link. I can't remember the one that had the Daily Mail is literally a Nazi newspaper. I can't remember which one that was, but I have got a link to the latest one. And this bit is that if you go to the 6-minute mark, that's where all of this kicks in. Okay, that's it. Actually, scratch that. I'm editing it because I want to add this bit on, because this was a really important bit that I wanted to get off my chest. In all of that, I lost this bit, which is that the really dangerous bit is the manipulative way this stifles discussion. Because what Ethel is doing here is like really going after her opposition and denying them even that they're even allowed to have words to describe what it is that they want to describe. It's not that their arguments are wrong. It's not that they're wrong to hold them. It's that it's wrong to even allow them to have words so that they can express their arguments. Because we had a situation where they wanted to differentiate between the individuals that produce sperm and have the mechanisms to do that, and the individuals that produce eggs, and have the equipment to do that, which is what biological sex. They are the essential properties of the biological sexes across the animal kingdom, not just humans. None of the rest of it, beards, tits, all that lot. They are secondary characteristics. They are accidental properties. They come after the fact. Same with DNA, by the way. If the XY ones produced in humans produced over, then XY would be regarded as the female genes, not the other way round. That would be the female combination. Not we wouldn't say, oh well, the females are the ones with XY. It just doesn't work like that. It's all to do with the gametes you produce. That is how you arrive at what fits into the other bags. So, wanting a word to describe something else, and so the terms man and woman have been sort of purloined and repurposed for those. But biological sex remained. And that allowed people to still talk about these things where they wanted to talk about biological sex. Where you wanted to talk about the same things that you might talk about if you were talking about gorillas or chimpanzees or bonobos or lemurs or gibbons or rats or capybara, or sheep or mountain goats or sulphur-bottomed whales, whatever it is, right? The same things. And now what is happening is saying you can't even have those words, because in humans those words mean the same thing as man and woman now means. So you can't discuss biological sex because the parts follow the person. A biological male is somebody who thinks that they're a biological male, somebody who identifies as a biological male. So you've lost the words. We now have no words to describe what is biological sex. Think about that. Think about what essence of what he's doing here. She is now leaving us in a situation where we have no words whatsoever to describe what was previously biological sex in humans. The same thing as biological sex in all these other species. If you want to talk about it in humans, I would suggest biological sex would be a good name for it. And biologically male and biologically female, the same as in all the other species, would be quite good words to use. But now we have none. So what are we supposed to do now? Come up with a totally new set of terms for biological sex, biologically male and biologically female in humans. And you know what'll happen then, don't you? You know what she'll do then? She'll just strip those away as well. It's like a kind of fucking madness, because it isn't. It's pure, unadulterated manipulation. It's one of the shittiest tactics I think I've ever seen. There's some pretty shitty tactics to try and shut an argument down, but to try and actually take away all the words, right? Every word that you could possibly want to use to describe your side of the argument, because this is what was involved in this discussion. Essence of Thought was critiquing somebody who was using the terms biologically male and biologically female to differentiate from gender identity. Talking about sport and how people are biologically male. And Essence Thought, you shouldn't be using those words, because biologically male just means identifies as a man, and biologically female just means identifies as a woman. Well, so what words is this person supposed to use to describe what it is that they're actually trying to describe? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to win this kind of victory, not by winning the argument, but by making it impossible for the opposition to frame their argument, because you're denying them the words to do so. I mean, I couldn't imagine a more manipulative and shitty and dirty trick as that. Okay, that is it this time.